Thank you for joining me for our next summit session, one-on-one, uncompromising leadership lessons from the C-suite. I'm Derek Dingle, Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise. I'm here today with one of the cable industry's most dynamic leaders, Steve White, President, Special Counsel to the CEO of Comcast. Throughout his career at the media giant, this C-suite executive has demonstrated a phenomenal track record, including his 11-year stint as head of its West Division, where he led more than 30,000 employees, served 12 million customers, and produced more than $18 billion in annual revenues. In his current role, his expansive portfolio includes strategic planning, leadership development, DEI, and digital equality. Steve has just written a compelling book, Uncompromising: How an Unwavering Commitment to Your Why Leads to an Impactful Life and a Lasting Legacy. In our candid conversation today, he will share his thoughts on what it takes to overcome obstacles to reach the C-suite, the value of purposeful DEI leadership, cultivating employee retention during the Great Resignation, and the importance of digital equality in today's environment. Thanks, Steve, for joining us at our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Summit.
Derek, it's so great to be with you, and I'm so honored.
Well, to get us started, I'd like you to share your portfolio of responsibilities at Comcast, your role there, and your objectives in that role.
You know, Derek, it's hard to believe this little company called Comcast was started in November 1963, and a short period later, we're one of the top 20 companies in America. So it's a great company that's been on an incredible journey. The last 11 years, I was president of Comcast West. So I was responsible for all of our cable operations west of the Mississippi, 30,000 employees, a little bit over $18 billion in revenue, and almost 13 million customers. So it's easy to say we were a little busy. Over the last handful of months, I've now transitioned to president and special counsel, supporting Dave Watson, our CEO of our cable group. And I focus on leadership development, DE&I, along with a host of other things, particularly around strategic planning for the future.
Well, no one knows that area better than you in terms of having been in the C-suite, having been in leadership roles. And, you know, for this interview, I'd like to base it on your new book, Uncompromising. It's an excellent read. I got a chance to read it and had plenty of great nuggets in the book, and we're going to share some of that with our audience. But tell me two things. One, why did you write Uncompromising? And please define your definition, share your definition of uncompromising to our audience.
Well, Derek, you know, it's one of the things I talk about in the book is that when you are a person of color and you achieve a certain level of success, it is your responsibility to bring as many people along as possible. And I can't tell you the number of men and women that gave me a hand up. And Derek, that's not a handout, a hand up, which is what I define as an opportunity. And what better way to write a love letter than to share with others all of this insight, all of this guidance that I received over the years, and I wanted to share that with others. So that's why I wrote the book. It's going to come out on February 22nd. And the book Uncompromising is built around this quote that's attributed to Mark Twain. The two most important days in your life is the day you're born. The second is when you know why. Uncompromising is about answering that second question. And once, Derek, you can answer that second question, that is what you're ruthless about. That is what you're uncompromising in your pursuit of your purpose and your why. And in my case, my why was birthed out of adversity. I was fired. And through adversity, I really focused on what is my purpose? And it was really around serving others, creating that table of prosperity for others. And so that's why I wrote the book. That's what the book is all about. And my hope is that all of our listeners will enjoy the book and walk away with something from the book, because we focus on clearly identifying 7 pathways that have worked for me in finding my fight in living a life of purpose, impact, and legacy.
Well, you said that you found your uncompromising focus in a motel room in Indianapolis. Take a few minutes to share with us what happened at that motel in Indianapolis and who inspired you to get on the path of being uncompromising in your goals.
Yeah, what a great question. And I want to really clearly identify this is motel with an M, not hotel with an H. There's no spa, there's no in-room dining, there's no room service and all of that. It is a motel. And when my mother was a young woman at 29 years old, she made the difficult decision to leave my father. We were based in Florida. We moved to Indianapolis where she had a brother. And she was 29 years old, 8th grade education, didn't even have a driver's license, had really never even held a full-time job. And her first job, Derek, was cleaning motel rooms at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, right across the street. So if anybody's from Naptown, as we like to call it, you know where I'm talking about. It's the Quality Inn. And Derek, she would go in there and clean these rooms. And on the weekends, she would bring my 4 brothers, myself and my 3 brothers along, and we would help her clean. And Derek, while her skill set was far greater than cleaning motel rooms, I learned that you approach everything you do with enthusiasm, the right attitude, teamwork, gratefulness. So she looked at this as an opportunity, not as something that was beneath her. And clearly, while we didn't realize it at the time, she was teaching us these life lessons around hard work, maintaining a good attitude. Don't let your surroundings impact how you think about your life. She was very focused on serving that example. And so I was 11 years old, and I can still remember those days. I can still remember those moments. And while I have no desire to go clean motel rooms, I carry those lessons with me because they played a major role in my life.
Well, she drove you to, find your why, push forward to success. But what I found very interesting in your book was the whole concept of finding the fight. And initially, you set out to be the most successful executive you could be, get to the top of the ladder, to have the trappings of success. But when you actually found your fight, it was a lot different. It was a lot different focus. So can you share with us in terms of how you found your fight and how you broadened your focus in terms of, your why?
While my purpose and why was embedded in me, supporting my mother in motel rooms, growing up in the housing projects of Indianapolis, I really had to go through adversity to really come back to my purpose. When I left Indiana University, I was a salesperson with a company called American Hospital Supply. I was Rookie of the Year, top quota breaker, enjoyed great success, quickly got promoted, moved to Chicago, ran one of our marketing groups, and then I got quickly promoted again. So I was the youngest sales manager in the company's history at 23 years old. I was living in Michigan, and I was focused on generating great success. And Derek, the mistake that I made, I was focused totally on what I was doing, how I could work harder, because everything up to that point was really focused on what I did. Now that you're leading men and women, it's less about what you do, it's more about what you do for them. There's a title of a book called Leaders Eat Last, and I learned that very valuable lesson because I got fired in that job, Derek. It was a very low point for me, and I deserved to get fired. Now, I didn't think so at the time, but I remember the day I got fired, a guy named Darnell Martin, who's no longer with us, who was a senior executive, an African-American in another part of the company, called me up and said, Steve, I see more in you than they see. However, if you continue to lead the way you're leading today, you're not going to enjoy success. I'm going to grab you by the shoulder. I'm going to move you from Michigan to Chicago. You're going to work in my group. It's not a permanent job. It's a temporary job. You have no people working for you. You have no portfolio. I'm going to teach you the business. I'm going to teach you how to lead men and women. And Derek, he led by serving others. And he was so focused on that, even though he got a lot of criticism for hiring me, especially since I had just been fired, he believed in me. And working under him, it became clear to me that success is all about serving others. So through adversity, through challenge, through difficult times, I came to grips with my white. Now, while it was embedded in me in those days in the motel rooms and the housing projects of Indianapolis, it took getting fired for it to really show itself. And I dedicated my life to ensuring that I was serving others. It's all about creating a table of prosperity for others. And Derek, what I realized, the more I served others, the more I poured into others, the more I got fed. And guess what? The more success that I had. And so that is why I talk about what is your purpose? How do you answer that question? Because once you answer that question, you're not working anymore, Derek. This is now a passion. And this is something that's going to lead to a life of impact and legacy. Finding your fight, identifying your why, and then being ruthless and uncompromising in your pursuit.
What I love about that story, because you vividly talk about the home you bought, the top of the line BMW you had, how you made your mother and your family proud because of what you have achieved, to transitioning to servant leadership. And also what was so great about that story, it talked about how you had this Black senior executive who reached back and identified another Black executive on the rise and cultivated him. You know, and through your term in corporate America, have you seen that phenomenon played out more and more, or is it more of the I got mine, you get your mentality?
Well, certainly, Derek, there's always an example of somebody getting to a spot and they're so happy to have it, they kind of hold on to it. But what I found is the more and more people I got exposed to, the more and more giving they were. As I talk about the purpose of writing the book, the number of men and women that gave me a hand up, and that's what I call an opportunity, not a handout, but a real opportunity. It just inspired me more. And I realized, particularly as you climb the corporate ladder or in whatever endeavor, you're a role model. People are watching you more than you can imagine. And so your ability to make a difference for others really does matter. When I left my last job as president of Comcast West, while there were a lot of terrific candidates, the gentleman that replaced me, Rich Jennings, is an African-American executive, 25 years in the business. He and I worked together for 10 years, and he is now leading Comcast West, and he's one of the highest ranking African-Americans at Comcast, one of the top 20 companies in America. That is what's important. See, because it's not important enough for you just to have fruit hanging from your tree. The real legacy is having your fruit grow on many, many trees. There's a song and it goes like this, Derek. You die twice in life. You die the day they put you in the ground. The second is the last time someone mentions your name. All of us should be striving to create a legacy long after we're gone. Just as I talk about Darnell Martin, others will be talking about us in a very, very positive way. And you only do that by serving others. So Rich is a shining example of that, but there are others that I've watched and observed do the same thing. That's how we make progress. That is how we create a more diverse environment, not just on us. It takes everybody, but certainly as a person of color, you and I, we all have a unique responsibility to ensure that we pay it forward.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And another element of your book and your journey, which is also fascinating, and you do talk about race, but what I found interesting is that you said that you didn't experience many examples of overt racism. However, you have this feeling, and this is something that I think is can be said about a number of African Americans, this feeling of exhaustion. Can you share with us what you mean by that feeling, and how did you and other African Americans thrive in this exhaustive state?
Yeah, it's a great question. I write about it in the book. I actually opened the book talking about my Black exhaustion from two perspectives, Derek. One is, and all of us are taught, particularly people of color, if you achieve a certain level of success, it is a responsibility of yours to bring others along. And I must tell you, Derek, that is exhausting. And my hope is several of our listeners can relate to that. It is exhausting knowing that not only do you have to think about yourself, how can you bring others on? And I started to embrace that. I didn't look at it as a burden, but it took a while for me to look at it as an opportunity and, quite honestly, an honor. But the second part of that is, Derek, I am under no illusion that I am the only smart person in America that's a person of color. However, Derek, I'm sure you would agree, we just don't see enough of us in the C-suite. We don't see enough of us getting that opportunity. And I'm no different. There's so many other smart people. And so my opportunity was being in the room, sometimes the only African-American in the room. I've been passed up for opportunities where I felt I deserved an opportunity, but I stayed focused on it and I still got there. It took me a little longer, but I still got there. Whenever there's a race issue or question, when we had the George Floyd situation happen, when he was murdered on May 25th, 2020, the number of my white colleagues that reached out to me while I was open for the conversation, it was an exhausting process to be the educator of everything Black. So that's what I mean by exhaustion. But in each situation, I believe you have to flip it. You can't look at it as exhaustion. You have to look at it as an opportunity. You've been placed in that position for a reason, whether you're bringing other African Americans along or educating white America or corporate America or trying to provide a perspective. It's important that you understand it. I remember, Derek, my pastor telling me, he said, Steve, we all have a pulpit here. My pulpit just happens to be here at Travelers Rest Baptist Church in Indianapolis on Sunday morning and Wednesday and Friday. I digress. If you know what I'm talking about, we tend to be in church all the time, but that was his pulpit. He said, your pulpit is business. And you need to look at that as an opportunity that God placed you there for a reason. So embrace it. Take advantage of that opportunity and really make a difference, whether it's bringing others along or creating a more creative and safe environment for other leaders of color in corporate America.
That's well, exactly. You definitely embraced the pulpit. You know, I read the chapter about, you know, living life as a learning lab, you know, and driving your curiosity. And when you reference the whole situation and the whole tragedy of George Floyd and how that impacted African Americans and so many across the world, you use that as an opportunity to take your pulpit, to take your experiences and drive the DEI initiative at Comcast. Share with us how the DEI Council evolved at Comcast, how you went about developing it, structuring it, and how you use that learning lab to create and design a program that would have wide impact.
Yeah, it's all about growth. And I remember when this happened with George Floyd, while I felt we as a company, Comcast, was doing a number of things in the DE&I space in a very, very positive way, whether it was representation, whether it was making a difference in our community, I felt we were doing a really good job, but we certainly could do more. And I remember Dave Watson, our CEO, and Brian Roberts reached out and said, we believe we can do more. And I certainly agreed. And they came up with the idea, what if we created this council, Steve, that set a vision for us, not only in the short term, but the long term. So how do we take advantage of this opportunity so it's not forgotten 2 years from now or 3 years? Because Derek, you and I have all been here before where there was an incident, there was certainly outrage, and for about a year or 6 months, there was a lot of activity, and then it went away. But Dave and I spent quite a bit of time talking about how do we create something that lasts beyond us. And that got me excited. And so as we were talking, they said, would you lead this effort? And Derek, I was not quite sure that I was the right person because while I'm aware of the struggle, I'm not in the struggle, if that makes sense. So I'm aware, but not in it. And so I really had to kind of educate myself and really make sure I understood what were things we could do that could truly make a difference. And so as a result, I identified 23 men and women across Comcast, men, women, white, black, Hispanic, you name Asian. We got as diverse of a group of men and women at all levels of the organization. And we set about creating a plan where we could listen and learn. And then how do we take that listening and learning and turn it into action? And then phase 3, how do we make sure this is sustainable for the long term? And so that's how we started. And now as a result, we've got a full DE&I team that's really focused on taking these initiatives forward. Let me give you one example, 2 examples of where we made what we believe we made a real difference. Our stories really don't get told. And we think education is a critical piece. So we created a network because it fits right in our profile. It's called the Black Experience on Xfinity, where it's a network, a fully programmed network just focused on the Black experience. And 30% of the programming we grab from some of our partners like BET, the Africa Channel, Revolt, TV One, and we put some of their programming on this network. Another 70% is providing opportunities for young Black filmmakers, young Black entrepreneurs. LeBron James, as an example, his production company, we signed a deal with them, and where we're just programming Black experience, trying to share a different story that does not always get told, promoting those positive images, because I truly believe education is a critical piece to helping all of us move forward, not just in the Black community, but certainly across America. The second program we created was Comcast Rise, where we focused on small and medium businesses of color, because they've been disproportionately impacted, not only because of COVID, but because of just lack of opportunities within some of our urban centers. And we focused on a program where we were providing grants and tech makeovers and other things within those communities. Derek, those are things as Black Experience on Xfinity and Comcast Rise, where we're investing in small businesses. These are programs that'll go not only this year, next year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we will still be feeling the effects of this investment. And that's where we tried to focus our opportunity. Where could we make a difference that would really not only be short-term impact, but certainly long-term? That is how we close the diversity, equity, and inclusion gap that we all experience today.
As you develop these programs through the council, how do you put in place the metrics for success, or even for course correction if it's not hitting the goals that the intended goals?
It's a great question. There are 2 things you have to do. One is you have to continue to evolve the business case, because not only is this the right thing to do, but it is also great for business. And so we have to keep evolving the business case. So on a regular basis, we update the business case so everybody understands, again, this is not a handout. This is a hand up. This is an opportunity. The second thing we did, we included as part of executive compensation. And while we know certainly, being part of a bonus program is not what's going to change someone if they have the wrong attitude about making an investment in DE&I. But what it does do, Derek, it creates awareness and focus. And now it becomes integrated within the operating model. Let me give you an example. Every month at Comcast, we have what we call a monthly operations review, where our key division leaders, they all get on a phone call with the key leaders and we talk about the business. And now, Derek, as part of that monthly discussion, we're focused on DE&I. We focus on supplier diversity results. We focus on representation results. We focus on where we're investing in the community. How are we coming along with Comcast Rise, our investment in small and medium business? So now, Derek, all of a sudden, it's not the bonus program that's got everybody focused. Certainly it's created awareness, but now once you integrate it into your DE&A and it's around everything you do, that's where the accountability comes in. And now all of a sudden, maybe we get to a point where we don't need specific programs. It's part of who we are as an organization, and representation just comes along organically. But You have to start with this incredible amount of focus, and you have to be unrelenting as you move forward. And the last point of representation, every 3 months, we get together as a senior leadership team, our top 30 executives, and we review our people of color, our high profile leaders, and we look at how are they progressing, who's moving up, why are they not moving up? And every 3 months we sit down and focus on that as an organization. That's the kind of awareness and focus we believe will make a difference. And I believe if other companies embrace those, they will as well.
So you've decided to make DE&I a business imperative at Comcast.
That's exactly right. No different than us going out trying to get more broadband customers or making a strategic an investment in a national channel. This is all about business. And what I found, Derek, is, and I think you would agree, people of color, nobody wants a handout. All we want is an equal opportunity to allow our merit and our skills to be judged properly. And I believe when we create that opportunity, we allow people to realize their best selves. And I think that's how we make a difference. It's not about a handout, it's about a hand up. And the more opportunities we can create for others, that's how we make a difference.
With this renewed focus on DEI, we've seen numerous corporations, a myriad of corporations making announcements about how they're going to drive racial equality, how they're going to address past racial inequities. So in a broad sense, how do we make corporate America uncompromising in achieving these goals?
Well, I truly believe the free marketplace will force people to adjust. Let me give you a great example, Derek. You hear this phrase called the Great Resignation, right? I don't call it the Great Resignation. I call it the Great Reset. And here's what I mean by that is the pandemic forced all of us home. It paused all of us, and it gave us a sense that we were truly not in full control. We are all very vulnerable people. And when you think you're in complete control, you're not. And so now as men and women, young and old, are thinking about how they're spending their life, they're making some tough decisions that, where I'm spending my time working, that's not feeding me. That's not healthy for me. That's not good for me. So I'm going to either step out of the workplace or I'm going to go find another opportunity where I can realize my best self, where I can live my purpose, where I can live my why. And so now you see all of these companies offering greater salaries, signing bonuses, not just at the senior levels. Frontline employees are getting signing bonuses to join different companies. And so if you're a company that wants to be relevant 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if you're not leading a purpose-driven company that creates a tent that's broad enough for all to be part of it, then you're going to lose because no one's going to work with your company. So the marketplace will force companies to really come into line and to think about it. And that's why I believe this time is different. People say, well, Steve, why do you believe what happened on May 25th, 2020 was the catalyst where things are going to change for good? There are no guarantees, certainly. I think we all have to be conscious stewards of making sure that we don't let this opportunity slip by, because George Floyd gave his life and his life was taken from him, and we cannot let that life go in vain. So I believe the free marketplace is going to correct companies to focus on what they need to do. I think that's where it starts. Number two is we have to continue to shine a light on the companies that are doing really well. And that's where Black enterprises can play a major role. Let's focus on the companies that are doing it really well. Let's highlight the companies that are not, but let's spend even more time on the companies that are doing it the right way to show everyone that it can be done. And here's a roadmap to do it. So certainly we're not perfect at Comcast. There are other companies, but hopefully, Derek, by you and I sharing the story of what we're doing at Comcast will inspire others, but also bring others out that you can focus on, because I think that's how we do it. So the free marketplace, and continue to shine a light on the companies that are really doing it well, as well as the companies that are not stepping up. I think that makes a major, major difference.
Yeah, we've used that spotlight in the past, especially where you looked at corporate governance. About a decade ago, we looked at corporate boards, and 40% of the S&P 500, only 40% had a African American on its board, and today now it's 80%. And that's by one, looking at those who have placed African Americans on the board and shown great success, and then also shining a light on those who, for whatever reason, did not include African Americans and true diversity on their board of directors.
That's such a good point. And once you get there, Derek, then we all have to speak up. I have the pleasure of serving on the board of 3 public companies: Hormel Foods, W.W. Granger, and Shaw Communications, a media company in Canada. And so our role as board of director members is to make sure that our voice is heard. Now, that shouldn't be our only issue, DE&I, but certainly it should be part of our portfolio to challenge by asking questions. As a board member, our job is to ask questions that advance the conversation. It's not our job to run the company. It's our job to strategically help the company be the best it can be. And the way I do it, Derek, is I try to ask questions that allow the conversation to expand, to take us to another level of thinking. And all of us have a unique role in making that happen. It's not just people of color board of director members, but certainly sitting there in that boardroom, we have a unique responsibility.
Well, that goes to another piece of the equation. You had talked about the advancement of African-American executives within Comcast, and we've talked about the board and the expansion of boards and including more diverse board members. But what still continues to be a challenge is having African-American CEOs of enterprises. I mean, over the past 20 years or more, we've seen Ken Chenault at Amex, Ken Frazier at Merck, Ursula Burns at Xerox. We've demonstrated that African Americans can lead organizations, deal with complex issues, deal with major crises, 9/11, the Great Recession, COVID, and steer the company forward and make it even more profitable when they enter in that position. Why do we still see a resistance to having more African Americans at the top level? Not only in corporate America, but right now we're looking at Brian Flores and the whole controversy in terms of the NFL and him becoming a coach there. But we're just seeing this, this focus on not having Black executives take major leadership roles and steering organizations to greater profitability and greater innovation.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not sure I have a great answer, but here's what I can tell you, Derek, and I see it in the pages of Black Enterprises, also online on Black Enterprises and other magazines. The number of senior African-American executives, men and women, that are at that next level where they're running large divisions, they're running large international units. The number of men and women that are poised and positioned to be CEO, I think we're going to see a dramatic change over the next 3 or 4 years. And let me tell you why. One is there's a plethora of executives that are sitting right there. My time just ran out, but the gentleman that replaced me, he's young enough where he can really compete for some of these top jobs. So I think that's number one. Number two, I believe investors now are demanding a more diverse workforce. And through that process, you're going to see more African-American executives get to the top, where companies and investors are saying, look, we want to see more representation. And when the marketplace talks, when investors talk, I think that starts to make a significant difference. And number three, I think there continues to be great examples, whether it's Ken Chenault or Miss Burns or others, that when they receive that opportunity, they've done a fantastic job. And so now I think it's getting more and more people comfortable. And then the final piece is look at the board of directors. You already talked about it, Derek. The growth in Black directorship now over the last 2 years has been phenomenal. And so now you get more men and women sitting in the boardrooms because those are the ones that ultimately evaluate the CEO and make the decision about the CEO. I think all of those things that I just highlighted really set us up for great progress. I don't want to believe the reason we have not seen it is all conscious racism, but certainly there are some challenges there. People are not comfortable. All of those things exist, but I remain encouraged based on some of the examples I just outlined.
Yeah, and with your counsel, you have the hard and honest conversations and candid conversations about race that will hopefully expand the focus on the individuals, the diverse individuals within the room that can play leadership roles and that can be a part of teams and build a greater understanding between teammates, if you will, in terms of driving the company forward.
And Derek, one of the things you brought up, Brian Flores, and the whole NFL situation, but we all know that in this country, we tend to follow the leader. And I remember, let's just play on the sports analogy. I remember there was a time where you could not find Black quarterbacks because there were people who did not believe, Black men had the necessities to be a professional quarterback. Well, guess what? Look at the number of quarterbacks now and look at the number of teams that are out looking for quarterbacks and are wide open to the best players. So we see that happening. And I believe as we start to see some of these ceilings break with a CEO here, a person of color, a CEO here, and all of a sudden they start to see those fantastic results, I think you're going to see the floodgates open. At least that's what I believe. I remain optimistic because I think the talent is there. I think the representation in the boardroom is there. I believe the investor community is challenging companies to be the best they can be, to ensure that they have a diverse workforce. And let's just be honest, Derek, America is changing. If you don't have a diverse leadership team, how are you going to attract the men and women that are going to be predominantly diverse to your company? So all of those things coming together, I believe over the next 5 years, we're going to see a real breakthrough in the number of executives leading Fortune 500 companies.
Well, as we see this changing environment, what our audience is going to need to do, and our young, especially the young executives out there need to do, is to position themselves by being uncompromising in their career, by being relentless, by not being distracted, by being radically responsible, by being focused on the agenda and finding their why. So as we wrap up our interview, and this has been a great conversation, please share with our audience some other tips that you have, some other pathways that they can take in order to position themselves for those opportunities by being uncompromising.
Yeah, thank you, Derek, for the question. I've read so many books where I enjoyed the book, but I didn't always walk away with, okay, what am I going to do with what I just read? What am I going to do with what I just learned? So I spent a bunch of time when we wrote the book, Uncompromising, is talking about what can folks take away. So we built the book around 7 pathways that I truly believe if each of us focus, we can lead to a life of legacy and impact and really bringing others along. Pathway number 1 is to find your fight. And people say, well, Steve, how do you find your fight? One is you got to sit down, you got to be quiet, you got to reflect. And it might not come to you the first day or the first week or the first month or even the first year. But usually it's around through adversity. It's always centering around impacting others. So pathway 1 is focus on finding your fight and your purpose. Number 2, focus on the real prize. There are these distractions over here because people don't want you to look over here. And while the George Floyd thing and the murder is terrible, Derek, man, what's even more horrifying is the number of young people that are going through these school systems that are not being truly educated. That is the tragedy. Number 3, life is about growth. Live life as a learning lab. Always find opportunities to grow. Someone said, Steve, if I really wanted to get good at something, what would I go do? I say, find 12 good books on that subject, read a book a month, And I promise you, after 12 months and 12 books on a particular subject, you're going to become very, very good at it. Pathway number 4, think and act like a business. I tell people all the time, while Comcast employs me, I work for Steve White Incorporated. That's a mindset shift. I am the chairman and CEO of Steve White Incorporated. My wife, Barbita, and my son are shareholders. And so I find ways to invest in my company so companies like Comcast would be interested in my services. So I find books to read. I go into training programs. I identify mentors that can help me grow. I seek out perspective. Pathway number 5, and Derek, you and I have always, we can always talk about how we've been hit with challenge and adversity, sometimes not at our own doing. But the only 2 things you can control in life is your attitude and effort. I'm going to outwork you. And I'm not saying 24/7, but I'm going to outwork you and I'm going to bring the right attitude. That's what I learned in that motel room supporting my mother. Pathway number 6, navigating uncertainty. Success is not a straight line. I'm sure people, Derek, will look at you or look at me and say, wow, they've been successful and they took step 1, 2, 3, 4. They don't know all the peaks that we went through and the valleys we went through. But this ability to navigate uncertainty, to take a punch in the stomach like I did when I got fired, and then finding ways to navigate that in a positive way. So surround yourself with people, and that's pathway number 7. In my neighborhood, we call them road dogs. Commit to road dog relationships. Surround yourself with men and women that'll be truth tellers, that'll challenge you to be the best you can be. They'll support you. They've got your back. But a road dog is a fight breaks out, Derek, and that person jumps in and helps and they ask questions after the fight. Now, I'm not promoting fighting, but you understand my point. Getting men and women like that in your life to help you will make a difference. So those are the 7 pathways. Find your fight, focus on the real prize, live life as a learning lab, think and act like a business, own your attitude and effort. Don't let somebody else hijack it, navigate uncertainty successfully, and then finally commit to road dog relationships. And in my book, I talk about my lessons, the mistakes and successes in living a life of impact and legacy by utilizing these 7 pathways.
Wow. Steve, this has been a powerful conversation. Thank you for sharing your views on corporate DEI, especially specifically at Comcast, but just as important, sharing your uncompromising focus to achieving a success, and more importantly, having an impact on our society and others.
Great.
So,
Thank you, Derek. I'm so honored to be here. Thanks for being allowing me to hang out. And if you want to learn more, to all of our listeners, please go to stevewhitespeaks.com. All the information on the book. You can follow me on social media, but also I think you can learn a lot by going to the website. So Derek, thank you again for allowing me to be with you today.
It's been a great conversation. And then also I'd like to share with our reader to go to blackenterprise.com to read one of the excerpts from your book and to see what we're talking about in terms of them being uncompromising and pushing forward in their lives.